Welcome to the News at 9.
Sunshine, go away today. I don't feel much like dancing.
And I'm your head anchor,
Some man's
Cailen.
gone, he's tried to run my life.
In news today, we have an amazing segment, starting with Dan, who has live coverage on the debated Rush-Bagot Agreement of 1817 and the Treaty of 1818. Here's Dan.
Hello, and welcome to C-SPAN. I'm your host, Dan Herrmann. And boy, do we have an awesome show for you today. We're about to join Congress on the decision of the Rush-Bagot Agreement, and later in the show we will witness another historical moment as Congress decides on the Treaty of 1818. Join us now as we deliberate, here on C-SPAN. Well, here we are. It looks like Congress is about to deliberate on the Rush-Bagot Agreement. The agreement began as a series of letters between Secretary of State Richard Bush and British Minister to the United States, Charles Bagot. The main idea the agreement calls for is for the limitation of naval forces on the Great Lakes in the wake of the War of 1812. Oh, it looks like Congress has come to a final decision. It has been approved. Each country has decided to allow no more than one vessel on Lake Champlain, one on Lake Ontario, and two on the Upper Lakes. Also, each vessel is restricted to a max weight of 100 tons and one 18-pound cannon. The Rush-Bagot Agreement is settled, people, and it looks like the United States will have a never-ending peace agreement with Canada. It looks like Congress is back in session to determine the ratification of the Treaty of 1818. Let's observe. The Treaty of 1818 is set to resolve boundary issues between the United States and the United Kingdom. The treaty also calls for the joint occupation of the Oregon Territory between the U.S. and UK, and also acknowledges the right of Americans to fish off Newfoundland and Labrador, which was first granted in 1783. Oh, and once again it looks like Congress has come to a final decision. The treaty has been approved. This means that the United States and the United Kingdom will both occupy the Oregon Territory. And it looks like yet another friendly compromise made between two former enemies. Thanks for joining us here on C-SPAN. I'm your host, Dan Herrmann. And we'll see you next time. Back to you, Cailen.
Breaking news right now in the nation's capital. And on the scene is our very own Julie Turgeon. Over to you, Julie.
It's 1819, and I'm here live in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, witnessing the intense negotiations between our very own Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, and the Spanish Foreign Minister, Luis de Onis. Here, they hope to settle once and for all the fierce border disputes between Spain and the United States that have been plaguing our country for many years. It's going to be a really decisive evening here. Let's go check it out.
It looks like we've finally reached a decision here in Washington, D.C. tonight. Spain has agreed to cede Florida in return for $5 million from the United States. Also, the new borders have been drawn up. The new boundaries of the United States have been defined by the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. The treaty now runs along, like the border goes, along the Sabine River, then down to the Red River, which goes into the Arkansas River, and then across to the 42nd parallel, all the way to the Pacific coast. As a result of the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819, America gained lots of new land, and so the settlers were really happy and they got to expand their borders out to the Pacific Ocean. Thank you, Julie. Here we have Frances Booth in the studio to explain to us the causes of the Monroe Doctrine. Earlier in the day, she went out to get the public feeling between Europe and the Western Hemisphere.
Hi, I'm taking a survey, and I was wondering how you feel about Europe, as being an American.
Well, I think that the British need to stay on their side of the world and get out of our side.
Yeah!
So, how do you feel about Europe?
Francis, to be straightforward about it, I really think they need to just stay put. We've got our own little thing going here, and they just shouldn't get in the way of that.
You're just totally different, right?
Right.
How exactly do you feel about Europe in the Western Hemisphere?
Well, you know, Francis, frankly, I feel pretty intimidated. As we Americans are trying to branch out, Europe just seems intent on keeping us boxed in.
Dan, do it.
Nick Jonas, how do you feel about this thing?
Told you I made dinner plans for you and me and no one else. That don't include your Christmas.
How do you feel about the Monroe Doctrine?
With awkward situations.
Those are the exact reasons for the Monroe Doctrine. Americans tried to expand in the Northwest because of the strain on population and opportunities in fishing and lumber. The Americans were not alone. Russia and Great Britain had held surrounding territory. This was a risk as the American settlements were weak and subject to invasion and colonization from two world powers. Another fear factor for the new nation was the threat in the Southwest Hemisphere. Many countries in South America proclaimed their independence, but the Caribbean islands were in danger of changing hands from Spain to France after the invasion of Spain by the French. In addition, if Britain aided the French, the islands could possibly go to British hands. Any combination of factors could endanger the new America. In order to make his position clear, James Monroe issued his doctrine on December 2nd, 1823, in his 7th annual address to Congress. Monroe declared that the Old World and the New World must remain separate due to their different ideals. 4 main points he made were that the United States would not intrude in European internal affairs or war. The United States recognized European colonies and would also not interfere with them. The Western Hemisphere, however, was closed to future colonization, and any act to colonize, oppress, or control any nation in the Western Hemisphere would be seen as a direct attack on the United States. And now back to Cailen to wrap it all up.
According to the outlines of the doctrine, the European powers were technically no longer to interfere with the affairs of our United States. Ideally, this doctrine would limit the colonization of the Americas by Europeans. However, this doctrine has been highly disregarded by the powers. The British, recently in 1833, occupied the Falkland Islands, despite the Americas' claims. Years later, in 1845 and in 1848, President James K. Polk used these principles to warn Great Britain and Spain from establishing footholds in the United States. As of now, however, there has not been an overwhelming response. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in tomorrow for more breaking news. And this is News at 9.
How much does it cost? I'll buy it. The time is all we lost. I'll try it, and he can't even